A figure walks through the dust of first-century Judea, his words echoing in synagogues and across Galilean hillsides. He is a Jew, speaking to Jews in the heartland of Israel. Yet, 2 millennia later, the world is still grappling with the profound, often paradoxical, and deeply controversial things he said about his own people and their nation. His pronouncements were not simple platitudes. They were a complex tapestry of searing rebukes, earth-shattering prophecies, unbreakable promises, and a divine purpose that would forever alter the destiny of Israel, and indeed the entire world. To truly understand the trajectory of history and the currents that shape our present-day reality, we must ask the critical question: what did Jesus actually say about Israel? The answer is far more complex and challenging than most have ever imagined, a message that holds the keys to understanding the past, navigating the present, and discerning the future. If you are ready to explore the depths of history and prophecy and uncover a message that has been debated for centuries, then you have come to the right place. Before we delve into this intricate story, make sure you are subscribed to our channel and have hit the like button so you don't miss any of our explorations into the most profound questions of our faith and history. Your support allows us to continue bringing these vital stories to light. To grasp the weight of Jesus' words, we must first transport ourselves back to the land he walked. First-century Israel, known then as Judea, was a pressure cooker of political tension and fervent religious expectation. The boot of the Roman Empire was heavy on the necks of the Jewish people. Legions patrolled the streets of Jerusalem, and the emperor's image, a blasphemous idol to the devout, was a constant reminder of their subjugation. This foreign domination was not just a political reality, it was a theological crisis. For centuries, the people of Israel had clung to the promises of the Torah and the prophets, promises of a sovereign nation under God's protection, a kingdom that would be a light to the world. Yet here they were, a vassal state to a pagan empire. This dissonance between divine promise and daily reality created a fertile ground for messianic hope. People from every walk of life, thick with from the learned Pharisee to the humble fisherman, were desperately looking for the Messiah, the Anointed One, the promised Son of David who would overthrow the Roman oppressors, purify the temple, and restore Israel to its prophesied glory. This was the dominant expectation, a political, military liberator who would make Israel great again. Into this powder keg of expectation and desperation, Jesus of Nazareth stepped forward, but his message was not the one many were expecting to hear. He spoke of a kingdom, yes, but a kingdom not of this world. He called for repentance, not rebellion. He prioritized inner purity over external piety. And when he spoke of Israel, his words were a double-edged sword, cutting through preconceived notions and challenging the very foundations of their national and religious identity. He did not come to simply affirm their existing beliefs, but to call them to a deeper, more radical understanding of their own scriptures and their purpose in God's grand narrative. One of the most jarring aspects of Jesus' ministry for his contemporaries was his unsparing critique of the religious establishment. The scribes and the Pharisees were the respected guardians of the law, the moral and spiritual leaders of the nation. They were meticulous in their observance of tradition, tithing even the smallest herbs from their gardens and fasting twice a week. To the common person, they were the epitome of righteousness. Yet Jesus directed some of his most blistering language towards them. In a series of declarations that would have shocked his listeners, he called them hypocrites, blind guides, and whitewashed tombs, beautiful on the outside but full of decay and death within. He accused them of burying people under the weight of man-made regulations while neglecting the core principles of the law: justice, mercy, and faithfulness. He saw a spiritual sickness at the heart of the nation's leadership, a focus on external performance that masked an internal corruption. This wasn't merely an academic debate. For Jesus, this was a matter of life and death for the soul of Israel. He argued that their leadership was leading the nation astray, away from a genuine relationship with God and towards a sterile, legalistic religion that had lost its heart. His rebukes were a desperate plea for the nation's leaders to turn back to the true spirit of the covenant before it was too late. He lamented that they held the key of knowledge, but had locked the door to the kingdom of heaven, refusing to enter themselves and preventing others from doing so. This critique extended beyond the leadership to the nation as a whole, encapsulated in one of his most poignant and sorrowful statements. As he looked out over the city of Jerusalem, the holy city, the heart of Jewish life and worship, he was not filled with patriotic pride but with profound grief. He wept, lamenting, "Jerusalem, Jerusalem, you who kill the prophets and stone those sent to you, how often I have longed to gather your children together, as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, and you were not willing." This was not the statement of a detached critic. It was the cry of a lover, a son of Israel whose heart broke for his people. He saw a tragic pattern repeating throughout their history, a rejection of the messengers God had sent to them, from the prophets of the Old Testament to John the Baptist, and now to himself. This rejection, he warned, would have devastating consequences. He saw the city as a house that was about to be left desolate. It was a chilling declaration that the very center of their national and religious identity was in peril because of its spiritual blindness and unwillingness to recognize the moment of its divine visitation. This brings us to the prophetic dimension of Jesus' words about Israel, which were as stunning as they were specific. Standing with his disciples on the Mount of Olives, with the magnificent temple of Herod gleaming in the sunlight before them, a structure of immense size and beauty, the pride of the nation, Jesus made a prediction that must have seemed unthinkable. He declared, "Do you see all these great buildings? Truly, I tell you, not one stone here will be left on another. Every one will be thrown down." This was not some vague, mystical utterance. This was a prophecy of total and absolute destruction. The temple was not just a building. It was the dwelling place of God's presence on earth, the center of the entire sacrificial system, and the anchor of Jewish identity. To predict its annihilation was tantamount to predicting the end of the world as they knew it. He went on to describe a period of unprecedented tribulation for the people of Judea, warning of armies surrounding Jerusalem and urging its inhabitants to flee to the mountains when they saw the abomination that causes desolation standing in the holy place. History would prove his words to be terrifyingly accurate. In the year 70 AD, just a generation after his death and resurrection, the Roman legions under the command of Titus, following a brutal Jewish revolt after months of starvation and horrific bloodshed, the city fell. The Romans, in a final act of subjugation, systematically dismantled the temple, stone by stone, just as Jesus had foretold. They set it ablaze, and the intense heat caused the gold plating on the walls to melt and run between the stones. To retrieve the precious metal, the soldiers pried apart every single stone, leaving nothing but a ruin. The Arch of Titus, which still stands in Rome today, depicts Roman soldiers carrying away the spoils from the temple, including the Great Menorah, a permanent testament to the fulfillment of this shocking prophecy. Jesus also foretold that the Jewish people would be led as captives into all the nations, and that Jerusalem would be trampled on by the Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles are fulfilled. This prophecy of a global diaspora, a scattering of the Jewish people from their ancestral homeland, also came to pass with brutal finality. For nearly 2 millennia, the Jewish people were dispersed across the globe, a nation without a state, often facing persecution and hardship, yet miraculously preserving their identity and faith. Yet, alongside these dire warnings and rebukes, Jesus also spoke of profound and enduring promises for Israel. His message was never one of complete and final rejection. Even in his sharpest critiques, there was always an undercurrent of love and a vision for future restoration. Central to this was his declaration of a new covenant. During his final Passover meal with his disciples, what is now known as the Last Supper, he took a cup of wine and said, "This cup is the new covenant in my blood, which is poured out for you." This concept was not something he invented. It was rooted in the Hebrew prophets, particularly Jeremiah, who had spoken of a day when God would make a new covenant with the house of Israel and the house of Judah. This new covenant would not be written on tablets of stone like the Mosaic Law, but on human hearts. It promised an intimacy with God and a forgiveness of sins that was deeper and more personal than what the old system of sacrifices could offer. By instituting this, Jesus was positioning himself as the mediator of this long-awaited covenant, not abolishing the old, but fulfilling its ultimate purpose. It was a promise that God was not finished with Israel, but was, in fact, doing something new and transformative in their midst. Furthermore, Jesus consistently affirmed Israel's unique role in God's redemptive plan. In a seemingly casual conversation with a Samaritan woman at a well, he made a statement of immense theological significance. Salvation is from the Jews. This was a clear acknowledgement of the divine election of Israel. He was affirming that God had chosen the Jewish people as the vehicle through which he would reveal himself to the world and bring about his plan of salvation. The law, the prophets, the covenants, and indeed the Messiah himself all came through the lineage of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Jesus did not come to erase this heritage but to be its ultimate expression and fulfillment. He saw his own mission, at least initially, as being directed specifically to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. This was not an exclusionary statement, but a strategic one. The plan of salvation had an order. It was to be offered first to the Jew and then to the Gentile. The foundation had to be laid within the covenant people before the message could go out to the entire world. He also gave his 12 apostles, all of whom were Jewish, a stunning promise about their future role. He told them, "Truly, I tell you, at the renewal of all things, when the Son of Man sits on his glorious throne, you who have followed me will also sit on 12 thrones, judging the 12 tribes of Israel." This is a remarkable statement that points to a future, restored existence for the nation of Israel, with its tribal structure intact and with his own disciples in positions of authority. This promise makes it clear that in Jesus' vision of the future kingdom, the nation of Israel is not forgotten or replaced, but rather holds a place of honor and specific administrative function. It suggests a continuity of Israel's identity and a fulfillment of its purpose within the Messianic age. The parables he told often hinted at this theme of future restoration as well. The parable of the fig tree, for instance, spoken right after his prophecies of destruction, served as a sign to watch for. While the tree might be barren for a season, its budding leaves signal that summer is near. Many have interpreted this as a metaphor for the nation of Israel. Though it would endure a long period of judgment and apparent fruitlessness, the winter of the diaspora, its eventual reemergence on the world stage, its budding leaves, would be a powerful sign that the end times and the fulfillment of God's kingdom promises are drawing near. This leads us to the ultimate purpose Jesus articulated for Israel, a purpose that was both continuous with its past and radically expanded for its future. The original calling of Israel, from the time of Abraham, was to be a blessing to all the nations of the earth. They were meant to be a kingdom of priests and a holy nation, a beacon of God's light and truth in a dark world. Jesus saw his own ministry as the ultimate fulfillment of this calling. He was the light of the world, the perfect embodiment of Israel's divine mission. However, he also made it clear that this light was not meant to be kept hidden. The purpose was not for Israel to hoard its spiritual inheritance, but to share it. This is where the Great Commission becomes so critical. After his resurrection, his final instructions to his disciples were to go and make disciples of all nations. The message of the Jewish Messiah was to be taken from Jerusalem, Judea, and Samaria to the very ends of the earth. This created a new and dynamic reality. The family of God was now being expanded to include people from every tribe, tongue, and nation, not by converting to Judaism in a cultural or ethnic sense, but through faith in Israel's Messiah. This did not mean Israel was cast aside. Rather, it meant the promises made to Israel were being extended to the world. The Apostle Paul, a Pharisee who became a follower of Jesus, would later explain this concept using the metaphor of an olive tree. He described Israel as the natural branches of a cultivated tree, and Gentile believers as wild branches who have been grafted into that same tree. He sternly warned the Gentile believers not to become arrogant, reminding them, "You do not support the root, but the root supports you." The root is the patriarchs, the covenants, and the entire heritage of Israel. In this view, the church does not replace Israel. It is joined to Israel, drawing its spiritual life and sustenance from the promises God made to Abraham. Paul also spoke of a mystery, that a partial hardening had come upon Israel until the full number of the Gentiles has come in. And then, he declared, in this way all Israel will be saved, pointing to a future, large-scale turning of the Jewish people to their Messiah, an event that would be like life from the dead for the world. What did Jesus say about Israel? He spoke as a prophet, delivering sober warnings of judgment for the nation's spiritual failings, a judgment that was tragically realized. He spoke as a son of the covenant, with a heart that broke for Jerusalem's rejection of her own king. But he also spoke as the fulfiller of promises, inaugurating a new covenant that would write God's law on the hearts of his people. He spoke as the Jewish Messiah, affirming that salvation itself had come into the world through the Jewish people, and he spoke as the Lord of all nations, clarifying that Israel's ultimate purpose was to be the channel through which God's blessing would flow to the ends of the earth. He presented a vision where Israel's story was not ending, but was instead reaching its climax and expanding to encompass the entire world. The relationship is one of profound complexity, judgment and hope, rebuke and restoration, particularity and universality. To ignore any of these elements is to miss the full scope of his message. The words Jesus spoke about Israel 2,000 years ago continue to reverberate through history, shaping the destinies of nations and holding the key to understanding God's unfolding purpose for his covenant people and for all of humanity. The story, the prophecies, the promises, and the purpose remain, and their final fulfillment is yet to be seen.